Since 2015, Jared Stillman has rocked Nashville sports.
That team freaking stinks.
And now he's back. The takes are hotter than ever.
I mean, let's be honest, he just can't coach.
Welcome to Stillman and Company.
Stillman and Company on the 440 Sports Network, presented by Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical, where, of course, Hiller, proud supporters of the Vanderbilt Commodores. They're also proud supporters of the Tennessee Volunteers, but proud supporters of the Vanderbilt Commodores who just went into Knoxville and put their foot up the Tennessee Volunteers' ass in the second half, something that, quite frankly, we don't always seem to see. In fact, we never seem to see it. I am legitimately shocked. To be completely honest with you, I am legitimately shocked that Vanderbilt did what they did on the road at Knoxville, because I've grown up my entire life watching Vanderbilt football. And in order for Vanderbilt to get 10 wins, in order for Vanderbilt to go on the road and to beat a UT team in Knoxville who is actually decent, and this UT team is, I had to see it to believe it. I thought maybe there was a chance Vandy could pull out a close one. Vanderbilt took their belts off and they spanked Tennessee's ass. And so with that, now brings up the question of, did Vanderbilt do enough to make the college football playoff? And what did we learn about Vandy today? For Tennessee, and we'll get to them too, because, again, I was actually expecting Tennessee to win this game, so I was expecting to do Tennessee won 9 games this year, and I know that it was a heartbreak against Georgia, and I know that they should have won the Oklahoma game, and they didn't play their best at Alabama, but the fact that they won 9 games in the SEC with Joey Aguilar, picked up off the clearance rack at the NIL department right before the start of the season, hey, it's not that bad, it's not that, and they just got belted at home. First, I want to tell you about Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. That's where we're going to start off here. Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. They are proud supporters of the Vanderbilt Commodores and of the Tennessee Volunteers, and they've been in business since 1990. They are family-owned and operated with 100% satisfaction. Of happy you'll be, or the service is free. If a customer is not pleased with the work performed, Hiller will make it right. I use Hiller at my home. They take great care of my home. They can do the same for you. Learn more at happyhiller.com. That's where I go to book. I go right to happyhiller.com. Professional, experienced, trustworthy techs come into your home, leave it clean and better than they found it. Proud sponsor of the Nashville Predators, the Vanderbilt Commodores, and the Tennessee Volunteers. Hiller, call the Happy Face truck today. Okay, so let's start with the game itself. And the game itself, again, I know how Tennessee views itself when it comes to Vanderbilt. I don't care that the NIL era has clearly changed how college athletics works. If you've got money and you're willing to pay for a team and you're well coached and your coaches are smart enough to be able to figure out who the right players to pay are and who the right players to pay are not, if your team does that, you've got a real shot, period. In the NIL era, for years, Vanderbilt always had money they could have spent on sports. They just chose not to. Memorial Gym was an aging dump. Vanderbilt Stadium, I was surprised the fire marshal even let 40,000 Georgia fans into, because if something happened in there, I don't know how, with those outdated facilities, they were going to let people out. And Vanderbilt finally said with Chancellor Dearmeyer, we are going to put shovels in the ground. We are going to build something at Vanderbilt, and then the Supreme Court ruled 9-0 that the players could get name, image, and likeness, which meant you got to pay the players, and Vanderbilt all of a sudden became a major player. And so that we all know how Vanderbilt got that way. At the same time, I don't think there is any Tennessee fan who accepts, in a year where Tennessee isn't just absolute dog shit like they were when Derek Dooley was the coach and they lost to Vandy and he got fired, I don't think any Tennessee fan accepts losing to Vanderbilt 45-24. So I don't think there's any Tennessee fan out there that when it came to this game today, walked in and thought, we are going to get our asses kicked, specifically in the second half, because it was 21-21 at halftime. So this has got to be a tough pill to swallow. Then, the second thing on the Vandy front. I actually thought Vanderbilt played kind of shitty in the first half. Diego Pavia, they're driving right down the field. They get a 3-and-out to start the game. Pavia is driving right down the field, and he throws an interception. And Tennessee turns that interception into points. And then Vanderbilt drives down, and they take a 14-7 lead, and then Pavia turns it over again. And Tennessee puts it into the end zone. And I'm watching the game, and I'm thinking to myself, watching Pavia throw these interceptions, and I'm thinking, does Diego Pavia know that his team is wearing white today, not orange? But it kind of hit me because when we look back at Vanderbilt's season, the reason Vanderbilt, if they don't make it to the college football playoff, and I'm just going to tell you, I don't think they're going to. I hate it. I figured a two-loss SEC team would get in no matter what going into the start of the season. I think most people thought that. But at the same time, I just think because they're Vanderbilt and brands matter in this thing, I think Vanderbilt's going to get left out. But put that to the side for a second. When it came to Vanderbilt going down, and turning the ball over and going down 21-14 and getting the ball before the half, and they score the touchdown on the controversial roughing the passer call, I'm fine with it. I thought it was a little late-ish, and I thought they hit the quarterback in the head, and I just don't think you can hit the quarterback in the head. But when you go down and you score before the end of the half, and then you get the ball to start the second half, and you score again to take the lead. So it went from a touchdown deficit to a touchdown lead before Tennessee touched the ball. I said, that is what good teams do. That is what Tom Brady and Bill Belichick for years were able to do in New England, is they would win the toss, they defer to the second half, and they double up. And when Vanderbilt did that to go ahead 28-21 in the beginning of the second half, I thought Vanderbilt's for real. Because when Vanderbilt was turning the football over early in the first half, Pavia, I thought to myself, this reminds me of the Alabama game where Vanderbilt was going to take command and Pavia fumbled the ball. And the Texas game where Texas scores on the first play of the game, a bubble screen for a touchdown. Vanderbilt gets the ball, Pavia fumbles the ball, and now they're chasing the game from multiple scores behind. That didn't happen today. Now, should Vanderbilt be in the college football playoff? I have already told you. I think they are going to keep Vanderbilt out of the playoff if everything, for the most part, goes to chalk. And I've told you why I think this is going to happen. Because in college football, it is a completely subjective method of picking teams. This is the Big Ten's argument when they want 4 guaranteed spots that are all determined with these play-in games. Now, the reason the Big Ten wants this is because the Big Ten wants to be able to sell CBS and NBC a de facto playoff game because the CBS Big Ten contract and the NBC Big Ten contract fucking stink. So the CBS and NBC are paying $200 or $350 million a year, and they're getting these terrible games, and they're going to pull out at some point, the same way CBS signed a terrible deal with Major League Baseball in the 90s, and CBS pulled out of that. And so they're afraid of losing their big partners at $700 million. So what do? You get these automatic qualifying games, and you go ahead and play them, and you give one to CBS, and it gets big ratings. You give one to NBC, it gets big ratings, and all said and done. But the reason that the Big Ten argues for 4 automatic qualifiers from the SEC and the Big Ten is because they are saying, in a 16-team playoff, they are saying, we don't want our spots decided in a boardroom by subjective, potentially biased members. That's just a fact. And that's why I think Vanderbilt is going to be left out of the college football playoff. Again, this is if it goes to chalk. So if Alabama were to lose to Auburn, then there is an opening. Alabama with 3 losses, perhaps Vanderbilt goes ahead. If Notre Dame loses at Stanford tonight, which they're not going to do, but if Notre Dame loses at Stanford, maybe that could. I do not think that Vanderbilt's going to make the playoff. I thought any hope Vanderbilt had of making the playoff was lost when Oklahoma beat LSU. But that wasn't the question I asked as to whether or not I thought they were going to get in. The question was, does Vanderbilt belong in the college football playoff? And I'm just going to tell you this. Yes. Vanderbilt belongs in the college football playoff. Period. They are one of the 12 best teams in the country. And I can make an argument for Vanderbilt against any of these other teams that they are going to let into the playoff. Let's use Miami as an example. Miami lost to SMU, a top 25 team, but not a top 15 team. And Miami lost at home to Louisville, who won 4 games this year, or lost 4 games this year. Miami didn't play a tougher schedule than Vanderbilt, other than the fact that they beat Notre Dame. Vanderbilt played an SEC schedule. Vanderbilt has 2 incredibly respectable losses. On the road at Alabama, top 10 team. On the road at Texas by 3, who just smoked A&M at home. That's the first argument. If the ACC is going to get their champion in there, and it might be Virginia, that's fine. But the ACC doesn't deserve a second team in the college football playoff. So I'd have to put Vanderbilt in ahead of Miami. Because again, Miami lost at home to Louisville. Louisville's a 4-win team. Or excuse me, 4-loss team. That's an 8-win team. Vanderbilt lost to Texas, a 9-win team, and Alabama, what we assume is going to be a 10-win team. The second thing is Notre Dame. What on Notre Dame's resume says that Notre Dame is better than Vanderbilt? And again, the committee has made so many claims over the years as far as, why they take a team instead of another team. And these edicts are not written in stone. The reason they have all these different reasons they can pull to and say, this is why we put this team in over that team, is because they like to be able to say, well, here is an analytical reason for why we did what we did. But I think that's just showing their math. I think that's just saying, oh yeah, hey, here's our work that we did to prove that we think Notre Dame belongs and Vanderbilt does not. Notre Dame lost to Miami, who again, I don't think belongs in the field, and they lost to A&M. And the A&M loss is not as good as it was yesterday because A&M just got smoked by Texas. Purdue, Arkansas, Boise State, NC State. I guess USC is decent, but I really don't think they are. Boston College, Navy, Pittsburgh, and Syracuse, and they play Stanford tonight, and they'll beat them, and Stanford sucks. So maybe one impressive win, USC. Now, they'll cook the books on the back end, where they'll bump up USC when they beat UCLA, and they'll bump up, whatever, because that's what they do. Again, the College Football Playoff Subjective Committee, they come up with the 12 teams, and then they make their case on the back end. If you were to ask me pure eyeball test, Vanderbilt versus Notre Dame, who would I put into the college football playoff? And the answer, if I'm just saying Vanderbilt or Notre Dame. Why? Because they're Notre Dame. That's why Notre Dame is going to make it. And that's why Vanderbilt's not. Why is Vanderbilt? Somebody has to explain to me. Why is Vanderbilt, of all the 2-loss teams that are in this college football playoff discussion, and I mean legitimately in the discussion, why are they last? Why is Miami ahead of them? Well, Miami has the win over Notre Dame. Okay. They also have the loss to Louisville at home. Why is Utah ahead of them? You want to say Alabama's ahead of them because Alabama beat them? Fine. But the way I look at it is, if I'm Vanderbilt, the case I'm making is Oklahoma just squeaked by LSU. We beat LSU comfortably. Oklahoma won a dogfight in Neyland Stadium. We beat the shit out of Tennessee inside Neyland Stadium. Oklahoma lost to Texas So did we. Are we sure Oklahoma is the 8th best team in the country and we're the 14th best team in the country? I mean, they lost to Texas by 17 points. Vandy lost to Texas at home. That was a neutral site game. Vanderbilt lost to Texas at home by 3. That's the argument I'm making. Again, look at the losses that Oklahoma has. Oklahoma lost by 8 points to Ole Miss. They lost by 17 to Texas. They just barely squeaked by LSU, whom again Vanderbilt beat comfortably. Now, they do have the Alabama win, and Vanderbilt does not have that kind of win, and Vanderbilt did not beat Alabama. But the committee has already said, we will consider the rankings of the teams that you played. We will consider those rankings when you played them. They said it in reference to Oregon's victory at Penn State. They said, well, Penn State stinks now, but Penn State was a very highly ranked team when they played, which again takes me back to Vandy. Because while Vanderbilt's schedule you can poo-poo, and this is what the committee is going to point to if and when they leave Vanderbilt out. But they're going to say Vanderbilt didn't beat anybody good. South Carolina's no good. LSU's no good. Missouri's no good. And I'm sure they'll dock them for beating Tennessee. Or at least they'll dock Tennessee. But if you're going to give Oregon credit for beating Penn State and where Penn State was when they beat them, then you have to admit that Vanderbilt went to number 11 South Carolina and won 31-7. You then have to give credit for beating number 10 LSU at home 31-24. They beat Missouri, who was number 15, and they beat Tennessee, who was number 19, and they went on the road to Neyland Stadium, one of the hardest places to play in the country, and they won by 19. Essentially 3 touchdowns. So, should Vanderbilt be in the playoff? Again, if the question is, will they be in the playoff? I am convinced that the answer, unfortunately, is no. Vanderbilt will not make the playoff. Should they be in the playoff? The answer is yes. Vanderbilt played a Power 4 non-conference on the road and beat them and dominated Virginia Tech. Granted, Virginia Tech stinks. People didn't think that at the time, but they do stink. But they dominated them. They dominated Tennessee. They went into Neyland Stadium and they beat them by more than Georgia and Oklahoma did combined. The truth of the 12-team playoff is it allows you to have a bad day. It allows you to have a couple of bad days. Vanderbilt had a bad half at Texas. And that's why they're not going to make the college football playoff. Vanderbilt, if you take the helmet away and you forget about everything that you've known about Vanderbilt for the last 100 years, since they had to schedule the YMCA and those schools back in the day, Vanderbilt is one of the 12 best teams in the country. They've proven it week in and week out. And this week, I think they earned some style points. I don't think the committee is going to do the right thing. I don't think the committee's going to put them in the playoff. I think the committee has been telling us the entire time with their rankings, they've been saying, well, that's nice for Vanderbilt, but every other SEC team with 2 losses is just cruising. 8, 10, 6, not Vanderbilt. I think Vanderbilt belongs in the college football playoff. The reason Vanderbilt is going to be held back from the college football playoff, I am convinced, is because of brand bias. And I was talking about this earlier today on Twitter because I have to give credit to Texas. Texas absolutely made a case for themselves as a 3-loss team last night by dominating A&M the way they did. And I thought Steve Sarkisian had a great line at the podium when he said, Do you want us to not schedule Ohio State? Because if we don't schedule Ohio State and we schedule Scarbini State and we go and we beat Scarbini State, we're 10-2 and we're in the playoff. And I said to myself, oh boy, that's bad. Because that's a really, really good argument from Steve Sarkisian. And that's the kind of argument that scares athletic directors that are sitting on this committee to sit there and say to themselves, well, do we really want to try to get teams not to play those kind of games? So I said, if Vanderbilt doesn't dominate at Tennessee, they're going to have Texas jump them if it matters. Because they'll say, well, Texas beat Vanderbilt. So even though Texas is 9-3 and Vanderbilt is 10-2, they'll say Vandy didn't play Ohio State. Texas beat Vandy at Texas. So let's go ahead and give Texas the nod. But again, it's brand bias. If it were Texas that was 10-2 and Vandy was 9-3 with the win over A&M, it wouldn't even be a discussion Texas would be in. It's the same reason why Notre Dame is going to comfortably get into the playoff. It's the same reason as to if it were to come down to Miami versus Vanderbilt, they're going to pick Miami. It's a powerful brand. And I've hated this because this is how they have done it for pretty much the entirety of the decade-long college football playoff. Ohio State, TCU, and Baylor. Ohio State gave the committee the option of putting them in the playoff when they scored 70 on Wisconsin in a meaningless Big Ten championship game while the Big 12 teams were sitting at home. But Ohio State was not better than Baylor or TCU that year. Alabama, 2 years ago, they got the nod over Florida State because Florida State did two things. Their starting quarterback got hurt, and they didn't win the ACC championship game by enough points. Alabama had lost earlier in the year, playing at home to Texas. They had gotten run out of the building. But the committee was able to excuse it because, well, Florida State's quarterback got hurt, and so that gave them a little margin for error. But let's not kid ourselves. Let's not pretend that it wasn't simply because they're Alabama with Nick Saban and Florida State was not. So I don't think Vanderbilt's going to make the playoff. And I think it is all brand bias when Vanderbilt does not make the playoff. The second thing, I do believe that Diego Pavia has earned a trip to New York. Is Diego Pavia going to win the Heisman? Probably not. I heard some Vandy homers this week talking about Diego Pavia should win the Heisman. And I'm like, hard to do that when the big game you played in, the big game you played in this year, Alabama, you turned the ball over twice. But Pavia is one of the 5 or 6 best players, one of the 5 or 6 most impactful players in the country this year. If I had a Heisman vote, I would probably go Mendoza at Indiana 1, Love at Notre Dame 2, and Pavia 3. I believe Pavia belongs in New York. And I have to tell you, Tennessee fans, the amount of shit that Tennessee fans have talked about Diego Pavia and Diego Pavia's mom, who is fucking hot, by the way. This should not even be a discussion. She is hot. If you don't like it, fine. Don't go out with her. But again, if we're being objective and we're being honest here, Diego Pavia's mom is smoking. And the Tennessee fans on social media talked so much shit this week about Pavia and Pavia's mom, and they don't like Pavia, and they don't like the attitude, and they don't like the cockiness. And I think that is the biggest load of shit I have ever heard in my life. This is the Tennessee volunteer fan base we're talking about. This is the fan base that prides itself on throwing mustard bottles on the field over calls they don't like. This is the fan base that loves their baseball program, flipping birds in the middle of at bats. This is the program that took pride in using a bunch of just unsubstantiated claims about sexual assault from 30 years ago to get a coach unhired because they didn't think he was very good. So if you're going to, Tennessee fans take pride in being trash. They love it. It's like, yeah, we're white trash and we know it. Not all the fans, but a lot of them. And they take pride in it. And that's fine. If you want to take pride in it, be my guest. But don't be sitting there talking about Diego Pavia's mom, just because you don't like his plays on the other team. Don't be doing that. So that's the second thing. And I think Diego Pavia does belong in New York for the Heisman. Now, what about Tennessee? Lane Kiffin. And I don't know if Lane Kiffin's decided what he's going to do. Let me know in the chat because I'm not following that right now. He's going to LSU, though. Come on. It's pretty obvious to everybody he's going to LSU, right? I think it's, again, obvious. If he was going to stay at Ole Miss, they would have already announced a contract extension. He's already said he's not going to Florida. He's already claimed, I think it was Pro Football Talk reported today, he's already building a staff at LSU. So Lane Kiffin is going to LSU, and that's fine. I wouldn't do it if I were him, but that's his business. But Lane Kiffin actually made a great point when he was dodging questions about his future, when he said, in this league, the reality is you lose one game, you're out of the top 10. You lose 2 games, you're out of the college football playoff. You lose 3 games, you're fired. Because now Josh Heupel finds himself, I think, in a very precarious spot where at Tennessee, you can't be getting run out of the building against Vanderbilt. You just can't get your rear end spanked at home by Vandy. And I don't care how good Vandy is. I think Vanderbilt's very good. I think Vanderbilt, and I give Vanderbilt all credit here, I think Vanderbilt absolutely belongs in the college football playoff. I think they're one of the 12 best teams in the country. And I think it is no harm and no foul in losing to Vandy. I don't think that there's anything that says Tennessee had a bad season or Tennessee was poorly coached or Tennessee wasn't very good or anything else. But this is Tennessee we're talking about. And at Tennessee, when it comes to NIL, you shouldn't be outspent by Vanderbilt. You shouldn't have, the NIL issues that they had, particularly at the quarterback position with all the Nico drama. You shouldn't have that at Tennessee. Not in comparison to Vanderbilt. When NIL became a thing, now, let's not pretend like we actually thought name, image, and likeness should only be used on name, image, and likeness. For example, Saquon Barkley does credit card commercials. That is name, image, and likeness. The Philadelphia Eagles nor the NFL could stop Saquon Barkley from doing that ad. Name, image, and likeness. When the Supreme Court said you got to pay the guy's name, image, and likeness, we all knew what that meant. Greg Sankey can say today, name, image, and likeness was not intended for teams to use collectives to buy players, but that's what it's become. But you knew that's what it was going to be. You knew it was going to be, well, now we can pay the players, so we're going to pay the players. And nobody. And I think there were 2 thoughts when this went down. There was oh no, what are we going to do? We're paying the college players. I don't know what we're going to do. And then there were the faction of teams and schools and boosters and everybody else said, fuck it. Let's pay these guys the big bucks. There was Texas A&M. Remember how mad Nick Saban got at Jimbo Fisher? They're buying all their players, all right? A&M went all in. But I don't think there's anybody that went as all in, and I mean pushing the chips in the middle when it came to NIL, like the Tennessee Volunteers. The Attorney General sued the NCAA. They got the first collective. They paid Nico all that money. Remember when Nico was the poster child for NIL? So we know Tennessee has the resources. If you're Josh Heupel, you can lose to Georgia in overtime at home. and people will understand it, and people will accept it. You can lose to Oklahoma at home. They played a bad game. They had a bad night. You can't lose to Vanderbilt by 3 touchdowns. And so, again, 8-4 is 8-4. And when you lose your starting quarterback at the end of spring practice, though their starting quarterback did kind of suck, when you lose the starting quarterback at the end of spring practice and you have to go take what you can get in the transfer portal right before the start of fall practice, you're not going to contend for a national title, generally speaking. But Josh Heupel has to know, this is the SEC. And you get your ass kicked at home by your rival, you're in trouble. If your rival is Vanderbilt and you get your ass kicked at home, now you're in real trouble. So I think Tennessee needs to be back in the playoff next year. I think Tennessee needs to go big game hunting in the transfer portal. I think Tennessee has got to look at next season with Josh Heupel as we've got to have a breakthrough season. And when it comes to these all-in type seasons and the putting your chips in there and the we're going to do whatever it takes, and that when you do that and you go all in, it's going to go one of two ways. Either you're going to go to the national championship game, or you're going to go to you're going to win the SEC, you're going to beat Georgia in the title game, and you're going to have a great season, and everybody's going to say, hey, we got to the semifinals of the college football playoff, and on we go to next year. Or you're going to get fired. And it's going to be James Franklin at Penn State this past year. It's going to be Brian Kelly at LSU. It's going to be, don't come to me with your excuses. And I know Josh Heupel has absolutely turned the Tennessee football program around. And remember, Tennessee fans were not happy about the Josh Heupel hire when it was made in the beginning of 2021. And he turned the program around. And by 2022, they were competing for a title. And we all know what happened with Hendon Hooker at South Carolina. We all know. But 2022, next season, will have been 4 years ago. James Franklin was in the Final Four of the playoff last year and is already recruiting at Virginia Tech. So, again, when it comes to Josh Heupel at Tennessee, he's done a great job. This year, if you had told me the day that Nico Iamaleava transferred with the weird Friday, Saturday spring game, nobody's bigger than the program, dads going crazy on Twitter, if you had told me they'd go 8-4, I would say that's probably to be expected. If you told me that day they were going to lose by 19 to Vandy and Neyland, I'd say somebody's in trouble. I don't think Heupel should be on the hot seat right now, but I think Josh Heupel should enter this offseason thinking, if I don't make monumental progress on this roster at the quarterback position and in the SEC and get back into the playoff, and unlike last year where they got smoked by Ohio State, win a game in the playoff or get to an SEC title game or something, if I don't do that, I'm in trouble. That needs to be the way UT approaches it. I have to say, I am actually stunned that Vanderbilt just dog-walked Tennessee in the second half the way they did. I mean, they outscored them 24-3. Unbelievable. Tyler in the chat, let's get to your reaction. Tyler in the chat says, Jared Curtis era loading up. So I want to be very careful with the Jared Curtis stuff, because technically Jared Curtis is currently a commit to Georgia. Jared Curtis is a high school senior. You guys know as well as I do, it's hard for true freshmen to come in right away in college football and make some immediate, humongous impact. It happens. But as far as a starting quarterback in the SEC and you being good that year with a true freshman at quarterback, it usually doesn't happen. I think it would be a lot to ask Jared Curtis to pick up where Diego Pavia left off. I think Vanderbilt, even if they get Jared Curtis, Vanderbilt should have and I don't know if this is, if they have to make Jared Curtis the quarterback in order to get him. I wouldn't do that, by the way. But I don't know if that's what they have to promise or that's what they have to. I would still go get a quarterback. a veteran quarterback, and I would do the same thing I did this year, which is I'd load up with older players, and I would try to go compete for a national championship the same way that they did at this past year, and then, develop Jared Curtis and then expect to eventually turn it over to him. But if you don't think it's noteworthy that in 2025 recruits are flipping from Georgia to Vanderbilt, then you do not understand the staying power that Clark Lee and Vanderbilt have going forward. Joe says, Vandy runs the state. A couple years ago, I say a couple, but I actually think it was a lot longer. I think it was more like 8 years ago, 9 years ago, something like that. 8 or 9 years ago, Vanderbilt beat Tennessee, and it kept Tennessee out of the Sugar Bowl. If you remember, that was Josh Dobbs, Alvin Kamara, and Dobbs threw a pass, and Kamara ran out of bounds. And that was supposed to be the team that UT had built and assembled brick by brick under Butch Jones, and they just ended up not being as good as they were supposed to. That was when UT fans kind of turned on Butch Jones. And after the game, Derek Mason, the Vanderbilt coach at the time, was on the field. They dumped water on him, and he was on the SEC network, and he was screaming, and he was saying, the V is back. Vanderbilt is back. And that was kind of a hollow Vanderbilt is back moment. When Diego Pavia goes on Bussin' with the Boys, and he says Vandy's going to run the state, and then you go into Neyland Stadium, and you beat the 19th ranked team in the country by 3 touchdowns, and you do the Heisman pose in their end zone, that's where you get what I call the Joe Morgan Award for being able to talk the talk if you can walk the walk. And that's what Diego Pavia did. And I said this, when it comes to the shit talking that Pavia always does, it's not my cup of tea. And I don't think it's Nick Saban's cup of tea. As in, if Nick Saban was the head coach at Vanderbilt and Diego Pavia went on Bussin' with the Boys and said that, Saban would stick his foot up Diego Pavia's ass. But at the same time, there are some guys out there who talking shit makes them play better. Diego Pavia is one of them. These guys that just get out there, talk shit, and then go back it up. It's almost like the talking shit motivates them to go back it up. And I'm a firm believer you can talk the talk if you can walk the walk. And what did Michael Jordan say? Michael Jordan said the sign of a real man is to talk all that shit when it's even score. It's easy to talk shit when you win. But a real man talks shit when it's even score. Real man talks shit when he's behind. Diego Pavia and Vanderbilt got crushed last year by Tennessee, and Diego Pavia did not play very well in that game. Now, people were saying he was hurt, or I don't care. He didn't play well in that game. If he was good enough to play, he played. And so he was healthy enough to play, and he did not play well in that game. And he still is going out in the public saying, we're going to run the state. You have to give credit where credit is due. You have to tip your cap to Diego Pavia. Again, a real man talks shit when it's even score or when he's behind. Diego Pavia lost last year, got their fannies kicked. This year, talk shit, backs it up. Wyatt says, if Tim Banks isn't fired, I won't be at another game until he is. Yeah, I think Tim Banks probably going to have to get the boot. Like, I'm just going to tell you, somebody's going to have to get the boot. When you lose to Vanderbilt the way you did, you played defense at home this year a lot of the time the way you did, somebody's got to get the boot. I cannot just see Tennessee completely running it back. Granted, they're going to have a new team. And I would say this with all due respect to Joey Aguilar, because I guess Joey Aguilar is going to try to come back and get another season of eligibility and use the Diego Pavia rule to do it. And with Heupel, you know, he takes these nobodies at quarterback and he makes them pretty good, even though they're not going to be good NFL quarterbacks. So guys like Drew Lock and Hendon Hooker and Joe Milton, and I think you need to try to do better than Joey Aguilar at quarterback. I don't think Joey Aguilar is why you lost. I mean, when the game was still hanging in the balance and Vanderbilt was up by 10 and UT kicked the field goal, I mean, Mike Matthews dropped the ball that hit him right in the hands. He would have walked into the end zone for a touchdown. But I still think if you're Tennessee, don't you have to try to do better at quarterback than Joey Aguilar? Like, it was fine given where they were sitting and they had to go get a quarterback. That's fine. But aren't you going to do A little bit better. Joey from Bellevue says Pavia's teammates and coaches love him. They helped him back it up. I think Diego Pavia has taken over that team. Now, I'm not going to say this in the same way that I say it about Joe Burrow, because Joe Burrow at LSU, I believe, was the coach of that team. Ed Orgeron told a story on Colin Cowherd's podcast that when he was recruiting Joe out of the transfer portal out of Ohio State, that Joe Burrow went on the visit and said, he came up to us, said, I don't want to do the recruiting stuff. I just want to eat crawfish and talk football. And we got in the facility, and it was probably about 10 of us in the room. And within 5 minutes, everybody in the room knew that Joe Burrow was the smartest guy in the room. And I buy some recollection of that story. And my guess is when it comes to Joe Burrow coached that LSU team. The same way Joe Burrow coaches the Bengals. That's how you win a national title with Ed Orgeron. Ed Orgeron recruits the best players. Joe Burrow coaches them. That makes sense to me. I don't think Diego Pavia is the coach at Vanderbilt. I absolutely think that Clark Lee is the coach. And I think that Jerry Kill is Diego Pavia's personal coach, and Tim Beck calls the plays. But I absolutely think that the team has taken on Diego Pavia's identity. And credit Clark Lee because he's embraced it. But I absolutely think when you're like, hey, that his teammates are out there backing him up, I absolutely agree. On the Tim Banks front, I do just want to say, on the Tim Banks front, there were so many times where Tennessee couldn't get lined up on defense. I'm like, what the? Get your ass lined up. Get the play call in, get lined up, and then do what you're supposed to do and execute your assignment. There was one where Pavia broke off a big game because the pass rusher, and I thought Jordan Rogers did a great job on the TV broadcast, but they just show the pass rusher just over pursued, and Pavia just steps up and takes off. You know Pavia's going to do that. Woo! Rusty says to the Music City Bowl, are we talking about Vanderbilt or are we talking about UT? Because I believe if Vanderbilt ends up not in the college football playoff, Vanderbilt will find themselves in the Citrus Bowl. And the Citrus Bowl, again, nobody gives a shit about the bowls anymore, but the Citrus Bowl is not something to scoff at when you're Vanderbilt. Again, it won't have the same excitement, but it's not something totally to just scoff at. That said, Tennessee, I don't know what bowl they're going to end up in. Their fans are not going to care. If they end up in the Music City Bowl, there ain't going to be, there'll be Tennessee fans that go to the game because it's a UT football game and it's in Nashville, but it's not going to be like it's been before where it's, look at this. We took over the city. We're the biggest name in the state. First of all, of course you're the biggest name in the state. But I don't think it's going to be 67,000 Vol fans at Nissan Stadium for the Music City Bowl. So if you're saying to the Music City Bowl, you're referencing, hey, that's where they're going to go, Rusty Shackelford, a.k.a. Dale Gribble, that they're going to go to the Music City Bowl for Tennessee. Maybe. I don't know what bowl they're going to go to. I don't think they're going to care. Tyler says, Cedric Alexander is nasty. Let me say this. There was a play before Cedric Alexander scored the touchdown, tie the game at 14, where Vandy fumbled the ball. And Cedric Alexander was hustling his ass off on that play, and he was the one that dove on the fumble. And that fumble could have been a humongous turning point in that game. And I thought Cedric Alexander played awesome today for Vanderbilt. I was glad that he got the touchdown run after he had the hustle on the fumble play. And then Cedric Alexander hurdled a man and stuck the landing. I thought that was very impressive. My son is trying to sleep in his nap, and Cedric Alexander hurdles over, and I just go, ah! Lindsay was not very happy about that. But again, it was worth the reaction. One person says at least Pavia will be in New York City for the show. Pavia brings in numbers. I just, look, I know it was a close game and Oklahoma's ranked higher and they're bigger brands, LSU, Oklahoma. I was disappointed that Vanderbilt UT was on ESPN, not ABC. I wonder what most of the country was watching. I'm guessing most of the country was watching Oklahoma LSU. I had a coach tell me today, they said they thought Vanderbilt was going to win and that Diego Pavia was going to have his Heisman moment. I don't know if I'd call beating Tennessee today and then, doing the Heisman pose in the end zone. I don't know if I'd call that a Heisman moment or not. It wasn't like beating Alabama for Johnny Manziel. It wasn't like beating Florida State by 50 for Lamar Jackson. I think if this were last year, where there wasn't really a clear-cut Heisman Trophy winner, sure. Although Travis Hunter had so much buzz because he played both sides of the ball, maybe Pavia would have had a shot. I don't think Pavia is going to win the Heisman. I just don't think he did enough, in the big primetime games he played in. I do think Pavia will be in New York. And that is something to be proud of if you're Vandy football. That you've got a quarterback sitting there in New York for the Heisman. I think he will be in New York. I think he should be in New York. And I think that's great. I don't think he'll win it. I think Fernando Mendoza will win it. I think Fernando Mendoza deserves to win it. But I think it'll be great for Pavia to be there. One person says, Pavia's family is so trashy, no one. Probably should have read that before I clicked it. Let me just say this. I'm a fan of Diego Pavia's mother. Diego Pavia's man. I'm a fan of Diego Pavia. I'm a fan of Diego Pavia's mom. Let me just say that. One person says, not to mention Vanderbilt didn't just squeak by them. They crushed the majority of the ranked teams they played. They beat LSU by a touchdown. And I remember talking to Caroline, during the game and after the game. And I'm like, they only won by a touchdown, but it feels like Vanderbilt kicked their ass in that game. Like, it doesn't feel to me like Oklahoma kicked Tennessee's ass when they played earlier this year. Vanderbilt kicked Tennessee's ass. Vanderbilt did not kick Missouri's ass. Vanderbilt kicked South Carolina's ass, who now sucks. But Vanderbilt did, in the second half of some of these games, South Carolina, Virginia Tech, Tennessee, Kentucky, in the second half, they took the belts off and just smacked some ass, which we're not used to seeing out of Vanderbilt. War Kitten says they might not get into the playoffs, and while that sucks, I'm also glad they finally got a 10-win season, finally. It's funny listening to Jordan Rodgers on the broadcast. Years ago, before Jordan Rodgers did The Bachelorette, Jordan Rodgers was trying to break into broadcasting, and he and I were real good friends. We're still good friends now, but we're real good friends. And we were kind of talking about, different jobs and different opportunities and I said to Jordan Rodgers, I go, why do you have to try to get a job? You won 9 games as a starting quarterback at Vanderbilt. 9. You won 9 games at Vandy. Nobody wins 9 games at Vandy. And now they've won 10. I think that's pretty impressive. But it will suck if they don't get into the playoff. DP says, where are all the big mouth volatile fans? Volley fans. I will say this when it comes to UT. I was texting with Chad Withrow earlier in the week, and I was like, hey, I'm probably going to do a post-game show after it's over. If Tennessee wins, you want to jump on and we'll talk about it. And the reason I said that was because if Tennessee won, I knew there were going to be a lot of Tennessee fans that were going to hop on the stream that were going to be like, ah! And when Vandy was just kicking that ass at the end of the game, I said, well, there goes the Tennessee fans tuning in. Not that I thought a lot of Tennessee fans would hit my stream as opposed to say like, the Knoxville stuff and people that talk UT all day. But at the same time, they know that Vanderbilt people would be here. They'd be like, we told you. And I knew when Vanderbilt was just kicking that ass in the second half, I was like, there's going to be like 4 people that like UT that end up joining this stream today, which is probably not great for business. But again, we don't determine the results, and good for Vanderbilt. One of these guys, Wyatt, says, in all seriousness, shout out to Vanderbilt. Pavia smoked our doors off, and I hope they get in the playoffs because they truly deserve to be in. Tyler says, I am personally incredibly proud and satisfied by this year's Vanderbilt season, no matter what the outcome of the CFP is. What an incredible and historic season. I'm not one of these guys who will sit there and say it's not going to be a disappointment if and when the committee does not put Vanderbilt in. And barring a miracle, I don't think the committee is going to put Vanderbilt in. I think Vanderbilt smoking Tennessee should absolutely propel them ahead of Miami. Do you think Miami would win by 3 touchdowns in Neyland Stadium? Of course you don't think that. But the committee's not going to do it. At the same time, if they had lost the game to Tennessee and they didn't make the playoff at 9-3, there wouldn't have really been any gold hang your hat on it moment for Vanderbilt. It would have been a great season. They won 9 games. They, were 5-1 for the first time since 1950 and all of those things. But there wouldn't have been, this feeling, I think, of joy that Vanderbilt really had a truly great season. Now, it'll be much better if they make the playoff because then you'll have that to always remember. But at the same time, they did the best they could. Like, they really... Could they have won at Texas? Yeah. I think the game that really got away was Alabama because they never really led in the Texas game. They led in the Alabama game. They had a lead. They were driving for a 2-score lead. Pavia fumbled the ball. They were driving in the fourth quarter to tie the game. Pavia threw an interception. Not saying that they deserve credit for losing close to Bama or playing them tough or anything like that. I'm not saying that. They lost the game and they deserve to be penalized for losing it. But that's the one that hurts. But if you thought before the season that Vanderbilt could do better than 10-2, give me a break. Like, stop kidding yourselves. So they did the best they could do. And if they don't get put in, they don't get put in. I'll think it's bullshit. And I think a lot of you will think that too. But they're going to be happy. And I say they, the committee, they're going to be happy when they get big TV ratings with Notre Dame and they get big TV ratings with Miami at Ole Miss, who I don't even know is going to coach that team. They'll be happy and everybody will. If Vanderbilt gets screwed, it'll be the same as anybody else getting screwed. By the time we kick the ball off, everybody will be happy. And that's just a fact. Kitten says, remember the 2020 season when the Big Ten changed the rules at the end of the year so Ohio State could play in the conference championship game instead of Indiana? It's all about who can draw more money. I remember years ago, I said to Floyd, I go, we always talk about how there needs to be a commissioner of college football. Josh Pate has said that he's going to be the commissioner of college football or whatever. I think a lot of people have opined that Nick Saban should be the commissioner of college football. And what I'll say to that is I want to know who's paying the commissioner of college football. Because what oftentimes happens is whoever's footing the bill calls the shots. Now, some places they don't. The NFL is an example where the TV networks do not call the shots, even though they're footing the bill. The NFL decides what the NFL wants to do, and that's it. College football is not. In college football, it feels to me like the people that are footing the bill, i.e. television, call the shots. We want Texas and Oklahoma in the SEC. Why? Because that's what television wanted. So it happens. Same with the deconstruction of the Pac-12, the demolition of the Rose Bowl. It's been all about who's footing the bill. And years ago, I said to Floyd, I go, whoever's footing the bill is going to make decisions in their best interest. So they're going to put a team that'll draw better on TV in the playoff over somebody who won't. And he got so angry and huffy and puffy. And he was like, if they do that, then the whole system is fucked. Well, I'm here to tell you, like many things in life, it feels like that's the system. And that concludes Postgame Live. Thank you to everybody who tuned in. Tomorrow we will have a Postgame Live, as we always do after the Titans games, Titans and Jags tomorrow. And then, of course, we'll be back Monday. Now we're going to go see if Alabama will lose to Auburn, which I don't think is going to happen. But I faded myself this week in 6-pack picks. In fact, let me pull this up. Because I think I did some of the other NFL games. and I faded myself this week because I've been doing so poorly in my picks. I had A&M minus 2.5, which meant if I'm fading myself, I picked Texas. And I picked Tennessee minus 3.5. Again, fading myself, Vandy plus 3.5. I faded Kansas City minus 3 because I thought Kansas City would win. Dallas won. I faded Baltimore minus 7. Yeah, so I'm 4-0 fading myself. Holy shit. That's going to do it for us. We are out of here today. We will see you live after the Titans and the Jags tomorrow. And, of course, we'll be live Monday at 2 o'clock. Thank you to 440 Sports. Like and subscribe. If you are not subscribed to the Stillman & Company podcast, please like and subscribe to this program. It's free just to like it. Go ahead and hit it up there. We will see where Lane Kiffin goes. I'm pretty sure he's going to LSU, but who fucking knows? And at this point, I'm kind of over it anyways. We will see. And for that, again, like and subscribe. 440 Sports, Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. We'll see everybody tomorrow after the Titans.